Hola y bienvenidos al podcast Un gato en tierra de perros, vuestra referencia para la política estadounidense, la cultura y mucho más. Hello, I'm Joe Magaha. Thank you, friends, for being with me for another episode of Un Gato en Tierra de Perros. Today I have with me Mr. Steven Eugene Kuhn. Welcome, Steven.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for sure. I've been looking at a lot of the news coming out of Europe, and hasn't been great lately. I recently saw that the CEO of Telegram came out to say that he was approached by the French government to try and help suppress any posts from the opposition in the Romanian elections. And then on top of that, on the Ukraine front, the one of the former opposition candidates for Zelensky was shot dead in Madrid. And today, I just saw that the leader of Germany is pushing to fight the revamping of the Nord Stream pipeline because he feels it'll create more tension between the West and Russia. In general, we're about 30 years into the European Union. Do you feel that because it came out as a really promising prosperity and market strength, 30 years into it, do you feel that it's a successful experiment, or are you optimistic for the future of it?
I was living in Europe when in 2000, when the euro came to Germany. And I remember very vividly because I had 3 cocktail bars. Excuse me. And when they said the euro is going to come out and it will be whatever the D mark was, it'll be 50% of that. So if something costs 1 D mark, it should cost 50 cents euro. Well, when the euro came out, everything cost about the same. So it was a 50% increase overnight. And I knew right then, oh Lord, this is a power grab, money grab. But it was beautiful. It was sunny. It was nice to see everyone coming together for a common vision, a common direction. But I was in politics as of 2003 in Germany, and we founded a coalition that then turned into basically what is now the AfD in Germany. And so I'm still involved with them behind the scenes, with the chief strategist and the vice chair. And so I've seen the evolution. And somewhere along the way, I can't put my finger, I haven't actually looked at when and where. It went from just and a justice foundation based belief in Europe to a manipulative, um, let's say, gutting of Europe. So I have zero faith in Europe right now. Most of the leaders are puppets, actors. They're uh, it's sort of like Macron. Is never had a job, never did anything, just sort of showed up, and there he was. They've most of them. I put out a post yesterday on X with most of the leaders that have been through the WEF, Youth School of Youth or whatever it's called, and so they've been conditioned by the WEF to do things their way, which is one world government, globalist, and own nothing, be happy, that kind of thing. So I have zero um, positivity when it comes to Europe, and even back when Greece was, um, let's lack of a better word, raped by the European Union and by the bankers. We went on a large campaign to stop Germany from bailing them out because Germany was carrying the brunt of the bailout, and our video got I think it got translated into like 25 languages or something. It was spent all over the world, and we actually won. So we stopped from being Germany from bailing them out. So Europe's a mess. There's leaders that are actually just technocratic appointed actors that have a script. They also say the same thing, and they're if you ask me, they're evil because anyone who does something knowingly wrong and knowingly against their people does it for one of two reasons, and that is they're just evil and they want power, or two, they're being blackmailed. And so if you look at von der Leyen, who's the president, and you look at, I forget his name, the vice president of the EU from Portugal, both of them were under charges, under investigation in their own country for fraud, embezzlement, stealing money, and they basically kicked them out of politics in their country and then made them the head of the EU. What does that tell you, right? So now you have these people walking around doing whatever they're told, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how outlandish, and knowingly, clearly, anyone with a third grade education can see that this is absolutely not real. So it's
Yeah.
it's a, it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, no doubt. It seems like, I mean, the left back in the 60s and 70s was very much anti-war, anti-censorship, all about freedom of speech. And it seems like there's been a shift in Europe and in the United States where they're all about suppressing dissidents and just pushing this groupthink, and at the same time people are pushing against it more and more because I think it's human nature that if you're being held down that you're going to try and stand up against it. But on top of that, the economy is not doing well. So when the economy is doing well, people will get complacent and be like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But uh, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot more factories, and there were a lot more things being created in Europe and in the United States, and we've offshored all of that to
Yeah.
other countries, to Asia, primarily China. um, how do you think that's going to play out in the long run? I mean,
Well, luckily, you can see through Trump that you can change that quite quickly.
yeah.
It'll go through a crash before it'll go through a growth. But if you look at Germany, for instance, since that's where most of my knowledge is, although I have worked in the parliaments or with the parliaments in Croatia, in Hungary, I worked with the government in Hungary, and just a couple different. I've lived in 10 countries, so that's why I've worked with those governments. Um, in Germany, they completely. I remember when Merkel was getting elected, she said, "We're going to build upon atomic power, so nuclear power," and therefore the nuclear corporations backed her. And literally 2 days after the election, she said, "No, we're closing every single nuclear plant." Yeah. And then they closed the coal, all of the coal. So the coal and the nuclear completely crushed their energy policies. It's failing. It's super expensive in Germany, just for energy. And if we want to talk about the Nord Stream, it's funny because Europe is still buying billions of dollars a month of gas, natural gas from Russia anyway.
Yeah.
And so again, it's another chess move, political move, whatever you want to call it. But I see, Europe crashing hard in some specific areas. I mean, there's still I would call it a middle class, not like we have in America, but still a middle class. There's in a lot of European nations, there's what you call Beamte, and they're employees of the state that you cannot fire. So under any circumstance, they stopped doing that a couple years ago, but there's a lot of them out there, including priests in Germany. So they're employees of the state, believe it or not, and they do what they're told. And I was just to reflect on COVID a little bit. I had some friends that were police officers in America and in Germany and different states. In Germany, not so much, but in America, I asked. I said, "Well, how can you throw someone on the ground when you know this is wrong? Throw someone on the ground because they're not wearing a mask. Put them in handcuffs. Put them in jail. Whatever. You know it's wrong." He goes, "Look, man, I got to pay my mortgage. If I don't do this, I lose my pension." And I said, "So just so I understand, you're infringing on civil liberties of other human beings for a $40,000 a year pension. Is it really worth it?" He goes, "Dude, I have kids, I got a house, I got a car, I got a wife. What else can I do?" So that led me to think, wow, all these years in the past, all the debt that has been built up in America per person, like I think it's between $50,000 and $70,000 per person on average across America, they're slaves. And if they don't do what they're told, they lose it. Now, coming with digital currency and all these other things that are coming out, not only do you have to keep doing what they say, but now they can cut off your money if you don't do what they say.
Yeah.
Once the digital currency comes out. So it's we're going down a path of something that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime when I was a kid. 58 here, and it's I still have many years left, and I don't want to live in a life in a world like that. So I ended up, just because my wife's Ukrainian, and when Europe started pushing for war, I did a video on social media, and it got like 10 million views and was shared by like Alex Jones and I don't know, Jimmy Dore and all these people. And I said, oh, okay, maybe I'll do another one. And then that's when it started. So 80 videos later, I'm still doing one every day. And it just sort of took off. So luckily, and for everyone's knowledge, I don't report on anything. I don't talk about anything that I don't have either firsthand knowledge of or personal experience. So I either have boots on the ground, and that's why I don't talk about Gaza because I don't know anybody in Gaza. I don't know anybody of any influence in Israel. So I can't talk about that because I don't want to parrot what other people say, what news outlets say. So what I say is really based on, tangible evidence, tangible experience, and knowledge that I have first person. So, Europe it's a scary place. And people say to me, "Oh, you got to pay attention to your own country. What do you care about Europe?" And well, I've lived in Europe for 35 years.
Yeah.
And in 8 countries in Europe, and for 35 years, and worked in there, and have owned 20 businesses, exited those businesses. Have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of contacts in the European Union. So I'm quite well versed, and I get daily hundreds of text messages from just about every country you can imagine in Europe, asking me what's going on and what do I think and what happens if this happens and how's that happen. So I turned into this like backdoor, I don't know, political analyst or whatever you want to call it. I'm not sure. Excuse me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense. I was born in Spain to American parents, and I went to high school there, partly. And you know, there we had Franco for 40 years, and then there was this push that seemed to be a push for freedom, but ultimately there was a push from the beginning saying, well, there's a saying in Spain, things were better under Franco, and so, in some ways they were because basically there wasn't all this bureaucracy. If he wanted a bridge built, if they needed, he just signed a paper and it was built. Now you go through all these different committees, all these different layers, and it's the same way with businesses. I recently saw an interview with somebody in El Salvador, and they're passing laws that are actually getting rid of a lot of the restrictions that businesses have, but that between the taxation and the permits and everything else that's needed in most European countries, it makes it really difficult to be an entrepreneur of any kind.
It's horrible. I mean, I had my experiences. I've always been an entrepreneur since I got out of the military. So I joined the military back in '86, got stationed in Germany, and I spent 7 years there, including my tour in Iraq for 6 months, and came back and got out and stayed. I opened up my first companies, and it's hell. You're taxed just ridiculously, and then they have, like you said, permits and building permits and outdoor permits and indoor permits and toilet permits, and I mean it's just ridiculous. It's just a money grab, and that's the difference. I did a video about dictatorships, right? And you said it. Everything was better under Franco. Why? Because it's simple. You knew what you had, you knew what you could do, and you knew what you couldn't do. And this is all about who can make money on the one bridge that they have to build. So who gets money first, then who gets money second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, all the way down the line. And so these massive projects cost millions and millions of dollars, where it doesn't have to cost that much because everyone wants their take. And this apparatus we have in the government, especially the European government, is ridiculously large. I mean, if you think about it, the European Union has an entire parliament that when it votes, the council doesn't have to listen to them. They can say, "Nah, we don't want to do it." So what's the point? What's the point? Is to show, hey, look, we're a democracy. Well, they're not. You can vote for your parliamentary member, and they can vote. They can't initiate laws, but they can vote on laws that they're given by the council. And if the council doesn't like it, they go, "No, we're not going to do it." And it's a farce. And this is how it is basically in most Western countries now, including America. America's a quagmire as well. I mean, it's gridlocked on every stage. You have a bunch of puppets over there too, and everyone knows who they are. And it just baffles my mind. You have people standing on camera on national TV, international TV, saying things that are so wrong and so against the grain and so absolutely false, outright lies, and they stand there and they say it in full pride. It's just they must have something horrible on these guys. And even RFK, who I work with some people that work with him, and he's even changed his tune now because apparently they have something on him too. And look at Bongino and Cash.
It's
All
just
of a
independent
sudden,
views. Yeah.
you saw how uncomfortable they were. I don't know if you know who Chase Hughes is. Do you know Chase Hughes? Chase
Yes.
Hughes. Yeah, well, he's a friend of mine. I consulted him when he was still in the Navy, helped him set up his company to become what he is today.
Mm.
And I just wrote him. I said, look, I want you to do an analyst on this body language on that interview because you know they're lying.
Yeah.
You know they're lying, right? And it's just it's sad to see, especially Bongino, who talked so much trash for many years on his podcast, gets in there, the director of the FBI, assistant director of FBI. All of a sudden, he's like, "Yep, yep, believe me, that's what he did." You could tell he was lying
Yeah,
against his
yeah,
own
because he
will.
didn't go into detail either. I mean, and they all they say is wait, and it will come out in the future, which is what every politician says, and then they never circle back. That was a big thing.
Another diversion, another
Yes,
diversion, another diversion, another diversion. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And the question is this: we can talk all day about that
hmm,
because there's plenty of that going on. My focus recently, if you see at the end of my videos, I would say, what can we do now? You know, and I've looked and I've tried and I've talked and I've spoken and I've debated and I think the only thing we can do is this.
yeah, yeah.
This is
Well,
really what
this
we can do.
seems to be making an impact because I mean, look at the elections, and I mean, there were so many ways that the establishment tried to knock Trump out of the elections legally. They, during his first presidency, they impeached him, and he also brought on a bunch of people that turned out to turn against him because he didn't
Never
really.
Trumpers, never
Yeah,
Trumpers.
yeah, and now this time there are a lot of changes that are happening very quickly because also I saw an economist say recently, he needs to make all these changes that he made. Partly, the opposition is used to dealing with one thing at a time and coming back just as hard. But when you throw too many things at them,
Yeah,
they're just scattered.
yeah,
And also, when we get to the midterms, which will be, basically when you're 2 years in, uh, because right now we're still in Biden's economy, and
yeah.
but 2 years in, he's going to own it. And if we're not
Hope. Let's
going in the
hope.
right direction, it's going to go the other way.
Yeah, if we're not in the right place, then it's going to be really difficult because there's people out there already talking. I mean, look, the narratives are just out of control. You have people that are just taking everything out of context like they've always done, but they've really ramped it up. There's no other way because they can't. They seem to not be able to win. If you look at the Democrats in Senate or more in Congress, I don't know what they're doing except for fighting Trump. Like I'm passing a resolution against Trump to do this, against Trump to do that, against Trump to do that. Like, what about like anything for the people? Maybe every once in a while, that's what you voted for. You're not there to fight Trump. You're there to get stuff done for the people.
Yeah.
And what happened to our country and in politics, not just ours, but worldwide. And that's why I go back to this. Trump is, in my opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, and from the knowledge that I have and experience that I have, I could be wrong, but this is what I think. He's walking a tightrope between the establishment and where he wants to go. Obviously, he can't crash it overnight. And I swear, I have a feeling that he's got a coalition with Putin somehow, not in a bad way, but in a way moving forward to free the world of this tyranny. Now, the post I did today was about, okay, so yeah, they cheat, they steal, they make money. They're making their friends money, both sides. So I don't know who's worse. It doesn't even matter. But the question I ask is, under which ruler side do we have more freedoms? That I mean, if you're looking at your own quality of life, and you're not going to be a politician and go out there and change the world and be the president or whatever, even then you probably can't change the world. How do you want to live? You want to live with an app, a chip in your arm, and being followed around wherever you go and told what to do or say, and knowing that they're corrupt, or knowing that they're corrupt but they let you live, just like we did under Biden and
Franco.
Clinton. Yeah,
Yeah,
Franco, exactly.
yeah.
We know, or even if you talk to the East German, I was there when the wall went down. I was in the military when the wall went down in Berlin, in Germany. And years later, I talked to a bunch of East Germans, and they're like, "Man, it was so much better. Even though we didn't have much money, we didn't have to pay for anything. We had insurance, we had car insurance, health insurance, hospitals were free. I mean, all this stuff. And yeah, we didn't have much, but man, we were happy, and it wasn't complicated. We knew they were ripping us off and taking our money, and rich and traveling around, but that was okay because there was a line, right? And we did what we did, and they did what they did. And now it's like everybody's in the take. It seems like anybody who gets a chance. And I have to be honest with you, if you think about it, if someone came to you right now and said, "Hey, Joe, I love your podcast. You're doing really well. I'll give you $5 million this year if you start talking about this."
Mm.
Could you say no?
I I probably couldn't. I mean, I wish I could say that I could. And honestly, I'm about your age. I'm 59 myself, and so who knows how many years I have left. It would basically be selling my soul though, because it would sell my future, and it would also mean that some really bad things would be associated with me for the rest of time.
Yeah.
I'd be part of. Yeah, I I
Hard to
hope I
answer,
would
isn't
say
it?
no.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope I would say no too.
yeah.
Because the thing is this is, to get people to do things that they don't want to do, you have to blackmail. And the way
Mhm.
they do that is there's a myriad of ways. Everyone knows Diddy and Epstein and all that stuff. They figured that one out already, how they keep people doing what they want to do. But there's other ways too, economic. They threaten or whatever. So you might want to say no, but in order to save those in your family, your friends, or friends, you you would say, look, it's either them or me. So either I suck it up and I'm hating myself for the rest of my life, or my family suffers, or my friends, or whoever. It's so dirty, it's so horrible, and that's why I've never been in the front. So this is odd for me to talk about politics in this capacity. I've talked about politics as an opinion, but never in this capacity. And that's why I never spoke directly to the big politicians. I always spoke through somebody, because I never wanted to be associated or in that game, right? And here's something I'm going to make public, which I've never made public before. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Yeah, what the hell? 2012, I was living in Switzerland, in Zurich, and I was approached by a guy from Chicago, and his wife was the CEO of a certain pharmaceutical company for Switzerland, and he introduced me to someone who everyone would know on Skype, and they wanted me to be a senator in Illinois, right? And I was like, uh, "What do you mean? You're a Democrat. I'm a Republican. It doesn't matter." And they said to me, "You would be the perfect poster boy as a senator. You're big. You're good looking, decent looking. You're not indicted. That was one of the biggest things. You've never been indicted. Um, and you have a Bronze Star. You actually fought in a war. You weren't just there. You're perfect." And I was like, "What? Why are you guys coming to me?" And they said, "Well, we saw what you did in Germany, and you gained 500,000 followers in a very short period of time, and they're donating and this, that, and the other." Uh, Long story short, after about 6 months of talking and listening and trying to figure out what it was, because I was tempted, I turned it down. And then they just, first of all, they disappeared. Never saw them again till today. Never heard of them. Saw them. Tried to contact them. Never heard of nothing. So I don't know who it was. And they, I saw signs that they were messing with my life after that. And so I said, I'm never getting involved in anything like that again. And that's why I just stayed in the back. And
Yeah.
I've indirectly um, advised world leaders with my opinion on what is going to happen next or things like that. I seem to have an intuitive answer for that, and I don't know why. I just have it. And even some American leaders, if you know what I mean. And so it's a strange place to be for me. I got a family, living here in Turkey, loving life. I'm not really into getting into this whole mix of things, but I feel compelled, first of all,
Mhm.
to talk about it. And second of all, because I have kids, I have 4 kids, all under 12.
Mm.
And I don't, I don't, I don't think it's right to have the life that I have and not talk about it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about it is I've done 80 some videos now, every day a video. It takes me less than 5 minutes. I talk once into the video, into the camera, put it in captions, remove the background noise, post it, done. So it's really no effort at all.
Yeah.
It's just knowledge based on conversations and experience. So I'm in a place right now. I'm not sure, it's uncharted territory for me, because I wasn't really looking to come into this space, but I'm getting a lot of attention. I was apparently, my video was on a talk show in America last week. I was told, I don't know which talk show, but I'm trying to find out. And then Jimmy Dore showed my whole video one time on his talk show or his podcast. And I was like, why aren't these people? It's weird. They're using my stuff, but they're not contacting me.
Mhm.
Which is
Yeah.
great, but they're not contacting. They're just using it, just doing it. And so I'm fine with that. As long as it doesn't get me in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's wild. This, I'm slowly growing with the podcast, but I haven't really. I have friends in the industry, and
Yeah,
they try and tell me to do all these different things, which are all kind of underhanded, like buying followers and that kind of thing. And I'm like, no, and I tell them, well, they're not real followers, so what's the purpose?
well,
I want to grow organically, and they tell me growing organically is not a thing, and basically this changes the algorithm so you're up towards the top of the list and you get more hits. And I just don't want to play that game. I'm which is why I think also I think I would say no to the $5 million, because basically if money was what was driving me, just like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm a screenwriter too, and a friend of mine who's in producing said, if you want to make money, this is not the industry to do it, and there's a lot easier ways to make money. So,
yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. Well, it's the same thing. Like I've never I've had an Instagram account for I don't know 10 years. I never grew past 11,000,
Mhm.
and now I'm at 150 within 80 days, all
Yeah.
organic. You know
Mhm.
why? Because for the first time I'm saying something because it means something to me, not because I'm promoting my business or talking about this or that or the other. It's like this really means something to me, and it's effortless. It's absolutely effortless. A few no videos have been banned on Instagram, but a few on TikTok have been banned or blocked or whatever you call it. And I try to stay calm and I try to stay neutral in a way that I show my opinions that I prefer what Trump's doing as opposed to what the others are doing. Um, but I also present both sides so that everybody can make their own, sort of conclusion of what they think is right and wrong. I don't preach it to anybody. And I think that's the fair way to go because emotion and logic never match. And you see, people on the left screaming and yelling, and then people on the right trying to be logical. It just doesn't work.
Mhm.
So if you stay non-emotional, semi-logical, speaking in a simple way to describe things, I've seen people write me and say, I've been a lifelong Democrat. I hated Trump, but you're making me think. And I'm talking hundreds of messages like that, not just one or two. And that for me is the world
Yeah.
because I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying, look, you got this and you got this. Which would you honestly prefer? Pull yourself out of the emotion and the hate and Orange Man bad or whatever, and just think for you and your kids in your life. Do you want this or you want this, and or something in between? Just think about that. And people are like, "Wow, like no one ever said that to me before." And so I'm having an impact. Not sure why. Not sure where it's going. What I'm supposed to do with it, but I'm just going to keep doing it until um, I see what happens. I guess.
Yeah, that's great, and I think that's the future. I think so many industries, obviously, well, I hate to say it, but politics is an industry,
Yeah.
and they basically everybody has fallen behind because they all are used to using legacy media, and they, just like 30 years ago everybody was kind of laughing at the internet and saying it was a flash in the pan and it wasn't going to last, and then there was this whole myth that the internet was the great equalizer, which it is to a certain extent, but for musicians or a lot of other people it just means less money. Musicians can't make a living the way they used to because they're getting
Nope.
paid pennies for each song.
Like I'd be on tour all the time now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it does make the great equalizer because anybody can go on and talk
Right.
and that kind of thing. And older people, folks our age or older, are still watching the old news networks, etc. Younger people aren't. They're on their phones. A lot of younger people, if they have a TV, it's only connected to streaming. It's not. They're not getting ABC, NBC,
Yeah.
CBS,
Right. But
CNN.
CNN, MSNBC, they have all the airports and they have all, you know what I mean? They have all the airports, they have all the public, places and stuff where they beam it out there like you see in the old movies in the 50s and 60s where they were trying to like mind control and stuff like that. So they still have a control and they also own the press. The same thing, is in Europe. It's all owned by the big media. And even in Hungary, I remember the last election they had, can't remember when it was, 16, 17, 18 or something like that. The foreign minister to America contacted me and said, "Hey, we need your help." And I'm like, "Who are you?" And he said, "Well, we know you live here, and we have a problem." And I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, Viktor Orban's in power, and we have the majority, uh, but there's an entity here in Hungary right now, openly, not even trying to hide it, that are taking all of the opposition parties. I'm talking left, right, green, freaks, you name it, all in one against Orban. So the Hungarians knew right away it was a fluke, it was a hoax, but they tried it, and it was literally Susan Rice, the Clinton clan, and some other people that were there.
Victoria Nuland, maybe, or was she involved
I
at
don't know
all?
if she was there. I don't have her name. I know that, but I know Rice was there.
Oof.
Um,
Yeah.
they were there openly
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, we need to get this guy out of here." Openly,
Hmm.
and I asked myself, what if Putin did that?
Hmm.
What would happen? You know what I mean? Or look at Romania, like you said, the French went over, right? What if Putin went in and did that? There's like, we can't have this election because Putin was interfering in it. Wait a second, didn't you just interfere in the same election? What? I don't get it. What's the difference? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like no one's has the discernment to say, wait a second, if France, and by the way, other countries as well, including America, were in Romania, including Alex Soros, who did through Moldavia and sent people down in buses, and like eyewitness accounts that I've spoken to personally, um, and they had Moldavian Romanians bust down to vote. Um, if they're doing all that, and Putin gave the guy, I don't know, $1 million or whatever, what's the difference? The
Yeah.
difference is the narrative. That's it. And people believe the narrative. I mean, I'm sure you believe, I'm sure you get some comments too, but I get the most hateful, I get death threats in
Mhm.
Instagram. I'm like, how stupid does someone have to be to write something like that down? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. They have an IP address.
Yeah.
You can
I
trace it.
mean,
Yeah.
hello? Yeah. And I mean, I've had like, Ukrainians say, like, we have posters of you up in Ukraine and we're going to hunt you and we're going to find you, we're going to kill you and your
Are
wife.
you
And
on
they,
their list? You know that list that they have of the kill list. There's
uh,
teenagers on it even, but there's also famous. I think Glenn Greenwald is on it. A lot of journalists are on it. You know, which is
I don't
crazy.
know. I don't know. I've never checked. I don't want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's uh
But look, we're not anti-Ukrainian at all.
right.
You know,
Right.
we're Ukraine. We're there for the Ukrainian people. I mean, hell, my wife and her parents. We brought our parents over from Ukraine when the war started, and they're living here next to us, a couple blocks down. And that's to personal sacrifice because we pay for everything. They can't have a job. They don't have a pension. It's like $100 a month or whatever it is because the Ukrainian government cut their pension when they left. And it's just we're not against Ukraine at all. My wife has a place there. The parents have a place there, and I have friends that have places. I have a guy who lives in Dubai, has a big house there in Kharkov as well, or Kharkov, or however you say it, whatever. No matter how you say it, the other side says you say it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Like Kiev and Kiev. You know.
yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, I can tell you're Russian sympathizer because you said it like this. I'm like, come on, I'm an American. We don't know how to say anything.
I love that.
You know what I mean? We butcher every language, man.
Yeah. Yeah. We do for sure. Yeah. 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 What do you think? I mean, Trump said he was going to be able to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours. Of course, that was ridiculous. But
Yeah,
at the same time, there's this bargaining back and forth. There was an attempt on Putin's life today by a drone um, from uh, uh, from Zelensky, basically. And this is just based on news that I'm
yeah,
getting off the internet. I don't have
yeah.
firsthand
Okay.
sources. Um, are we going to be able to come to an agreement? You think within the next 6 months or a year, or is it something that's just going to be long term?
Well, then the analysts that I'm talking to, or the people that I'm talking to that are sort of in the know, don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And Israel is days away from, going into Iran, which will divert attention again, and make it less noticeable what's going on there in Ukraine and Russia. Putin's not going to kneel. He's not going to stop. He wants what he wants right now, and that's it. And I think Trump is okay with that. What my question is this: the European Union, they're bitching and complaining about, Putin's not going to step down. Why don't they just pick up the damn phone and talk to him?
Yes.
What do they do? What do they do? They say, "Daddy Trump, can you help us?" They say, "We don't need Trump. Trump's bad." Trump's, hey, but we need help. Can you fund us? Can you fund the war? And can you talk to Putin? Like, either you want to run your countries and your nations, or you don't. Quit pretending you are, and then you always have to ask for help. And that's what's puzzling. Not puzzling. It's just actually humorous to me. Is you have all these um, fake politicians in Europe,
And in the
even
United States too, that
uh,
refuse to. I mean, the whole thing is we won't we don't negotiate with terrorists or with, but it's, Biden didn't speak to Putin, I think, the whole time, which is crazy. That's diplomacy is
yeah,
talking, and you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies. You talk to your friends too, but
yeah, yeah. You don't negotiate with your friends. You're saying, hey, dude, cut it out. Okay, you're right. You know, what I mean, that's how it works with friends, but
yeah,
with enemies, it's a little different. But that's what diplomacy was always. That's why we have diplomats.
yes,
What's called the diplomatic corps there for if we're not using them. You know, it's just they become operatives. You know,
right.
and it's just a I you know my wife grew up in Kharkiv, um, speaking Russian. They didn't speak Ukrainian there, even though she's Ukrainian born, Ukrainian, parents. Um, and so she speaks Ukrainian, of course. And Zelensky even had to learn Ukrainian because he only spoke Russian. And so everybody's like, "Oh, she's a Russian, whatever," and you're a Russian sympathizer, and this, that, and the other. And like, dude, Eastern Ukraine was Russian, ethnic or otherwise. They spoke Russian. It was official language. It wasn't changed until Ukrainian till a few years ago, 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, something like that. And a lot of people had problems because they're working in the government. All of a sudden, they have to speak Ukrainian. They can't. You know,
Yeah.
so they lost their jobs and all kinds of stuff. And then, of course, you have the Donbass. Some people say the Russians did it and they planted it, and some say the Ukrainians did it and they planted it. It doesn't even matter. The point is this: Ukraine's about out of people, almost
Yeah.
out of people.
Yeah.
There's nobody left. They're kidnapping people off the street, dragging them into beating them to death before they even get to the front lines. Then you have the mercenaries, the ex-soldiers, the ex-military from UK, America, and other countries going over there and fighting for the Ukrainians, and they're not being paid either. They're out in the front like, oh, wait a second, I came here and I'm supposed to get paid, and now we're not getting paid. You know, and now they're complaining, and it's like it's a total mess. And I don't know what if you just look at logic for a second, right? Okay, Zelensky said, "I will fight to the last man." It looks like that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
First of all, who's he to say that?
Right. Yeah.
Who's he? Okay, he's the president. Okay, and does that mean he can send everyone to the last man to battle to die? I don't think so. And it's there's massive oppression over there, as you said. He was just in Kiev. You know that, right? The opposition,
Yeah.
and he had made a deal with Zelensky. Let me start an opposition to give the picture, the image of an opposition party to you, but we'll work together. And Zelensky said, okay. And he went down and boom, he was dead. So it's like they don't even want that. They don't even want a fake opposition. They just want total, absolute control. Apparently, this is what I heard. And it's just, it, it's
It
scary,
seems
man.
to be such a money grab. I mean, people don't talk about this in the news, but you see it on independent media. All these multimillionaire Ukrainians in Monaco and
Yeah.
um, driving around in these crazy cars and sending their kids to these international schools. And you're like, where did the money come from? And then at the same time, the money's disappearing that we're
Yeah.
supposedly sending over there.
Well, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. I don't. But I can tell you this: here in Turkey, there's probably about 1 million Russians and Ukrainians that left after before the war, or as the war started. They were already rich. All the rich people left. They were the only ones that could leave. The other ones weren't allowed to leave. So they rolled in here in their Range Rovers and their Bentleys and their Rolls Royces and stuff. They were here before it even started. So there's a lot of rich ones that were already there. I mean, I helped one guy relocate his company. It was a big IT company in Ukraine. His wife was Russian. They had to get out. I helped him sort of relocate his company to the States so he could survive. And he kept his employees in Western Ukraine. At least he paid them, still. So I don't know. The money obviously is being misappropriated. That's obvious. You can't even
And the
trace it.
arms, I hear that some of the arms have showed up
Yeah,
in warlords' hands and that kind of thing all over the world. Even in
cartel.
Mexican narcos have some
Cartel.
arms that were geared towards Ukraine.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
apparently over 50% were sold in the black market. I have friends that are in that business,
Mm.
but legally for the U.S. government and stuff, and they couldn't stop making money. Like they couldn't get enough. I mean, they were saying, "Hey, Steve, we can get some artillery shells." I'm like, "Me? How am I supposed to know? Don't you know somebody?" So I called somebody. Yeah, we can get them in Egypt. It's like, all right, we need 6 tons or whatever it was. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this, man. It's crazy when you're in my business, which is funding deals and funding companies and M&A, mergers and acquisitions. You run into all kinds of craziness. You got to be very careful, especially as an American. You got to be very careful what you do. I did some infrastructure deals with DIFs back, a couple years ago. Donor advised funds, which is basically funds earmarked from billionaires for donations to be used for humanitarian aid and things like in Kosovo, rebuilding the grid, hospitals, police stations, police cars, ambulances, all this kind of stuff for like 200, $300 million. And if I would take in even a pen as a gift, I'd be liable to the U.S. government for taking bribes. It's such a tricky business. You have to be very, very careful doing this kind of thing. So I try to stay away from anything that has to do with anything that's crazy like that. I just do normal businesses that aren't connected to the government, that kind of stuff. Keep my nose
Yeah,
clean.
yeah. It's wild the way governments can turn against their own citizens. There was a journalist, I think, that was in Ukraine recently from Germany who's banned from returning to the European Union, or two of them. Um, there's a whole shift sociologically in the United States and in Europe where we've had a mass migration from other countries as well, and it's changed um, the landscape and the economy. And these are all struggling economies. In Europe, it seems like the vast majority of people that are coming in are Muslim as well, which is
Yeah.
kind of scary to a certain extent. It shouldn't necessarily be scary, but it does change the culture of Europe. What do you think is behind all of this?
Well, there's a few folds in this. The first fold is we were never told Muslims were bad until 9/11. I remember when I went to Iraq, we weren't fighting Muslims, we were fighting Iraqis.
Mhm.
It was never Muslim bad, never. And it never even dawned on me. And 9/11, that changed everything. Like everyone with a beard was a terrorist, you know. And that's the first part. So we've been conditioned to think it's all bad. Second part is the Muslim Brotherhood, all these organizations, they're outlawed in let's say forward-thinking Arab countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia. They set one foot, they're in jail. So what do? They export them all, and the West is like, come to us. So all the extremists don't live in the Middle East; they live in the West now.
Except Syria, I guess. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know.
now, yeah. Well, I'm talking about the forward-thinking ones like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and stuff like that. And so that's a huge problem as well. You even have the imams coming out going like, America, Western Europe, you got to stop doing this because you're taking our criminals, welcoming them with open arms and giving them everything for free. So I was in Europe, of course, when the big push started. And that was 2015, and they started letting millions of immigrants in. And I went to the train station. Hungary said no, because the law was anybody immigrating or fleeing into the European Union had to register in the first European country where they landed. Well, they were all going to Germany and Austria because they were paying the biggest amount of money. So all the countries would just let them through, go, just don't stop in our country. And Hungary said, no, you're not going through our country. And so I went to the train station where they had them all there, and there must have been 3 or 4 thousand Syrians or whatever foreigners there, all men. I saw 3 women out of 3,000 people. So I said, I got my iPhone. Let me interview somebody here and see where they're from. Dude, it took me 3 hours to find one Syrian. And it was him and his 3 buddies. And he said, yeah, there's war in my country and I'm going to Germany to have a better life and that kind of stuff. I said, really? Did you see war? He goes, oh no, I've been living in Turkey for 3 years.
I'm a
I'm like,
waiter.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay. Okay. So, and then I met this doctor. He had a beard and he was like sitting out in his tent. He had like his own tent. Looked really like clean cut and everything. I was like, this guy sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, what the hell is he doing here? So I said, hey, do you speak English? He goes, yeah, perfect English. I said, are you fleeing? And he goes, yeah, I'm fleeing Syria. I said, oh, Syria. I haven't found many Syrians. He goes, yeah, there aren't many. They're mostly Afghani. There was even Serbians and like Eastern Europeans that aren't the European. Everybody was trying to get in. And I said, well, what are you doing here? He goes, hey, they paid us. I said, what do you mean? He said, you went to the bank, they gave you 3,500 euros and said, go. And I
Wow.
said, what do you mean they gave it to you? He goes, yeah, they just gave it to you. They just gave it to you 3,500 euros and you could go. So I took 3,500 euros and I go. I was like, what? Wow. I can't tell anybody that shit because no one's going to believe me. So then I was talking to the taxi drivers. So that's friends that were taxi drivers in Budapest. Dude, they were cashing in because obviously they didn't know what 3,500 euros was. Because in Hungary, it's not euro, it's the forint, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Hungarian forint, which is the oldest currency on the planet, by the way. And I still constantly use currency on the planet.
Right.
And these taxi drivers would drive these illegally, drive a taxi load full of these people into Austria because at the time there weren't any borders anymore. There was no border patrol anymore because it was open Europe, and they would charge them like 2 grand a piece to drive.
Wow.
It was like 2.5 hours to the
Your whole
Austria.
nut, basically.
Yeah, and these guys are like taxi drivers are like buying houses, and I mean, from these. And I was like, this is a whole economy. This immigration thing is a whole economy on its own. And then you get to Germany and you see the laws starting being passed. And in Germany, there's actually laws. I don't know if they're still there, but I'm sure they are. Is that if you're Muslim and your belief and your religion says you can have more than one wife, you can do that in Germany. Number one. Number two, you collect Social Security and unemployment benefits for all of them people as well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you have immigrants that come to Germany, and after 2 or 3 months of being paid to show up, given a house, given money, they're making 10 grand a month on Social Security or on welfare for their family. And you got Germans you know when they're unemployed, they get 400 bucks or whatever it is. You know, so obviously there's a riff in the society there. But in Germany, and this is my reason, this is my thought behind it in Germany and Austria, is the Germans can't complain because they'll be called a Nazi instantly.
Yeah, and I mean, basically, it's crazy, but there's this whole the leftist movement that's pushing this, but from what I read, the majority of mayors now of UK cities are Muslim.
Yeah.
Um, it's backfired already on the left in some parts of the United States, like in Michigan. There have been I read that there are some cities around Detroit where it was the far left that was pushing these Muslims to come in, and then when they became the majority, they started passing anti-gay laws and stuff like that. And the left was like, "What are you doing?" They're like, "Well, no, this is our society now. We're the majority, and
Yeah.
this is." So they kind of, it's kind of like Queers for Palestine or whatever. It makes no sense. Go to Palestine and see what happens. They'll throw you off a roof. Um,
Well, when I was talking to the Imam was talking. They said, why do the Muslims always partner up with the leftists? It
mhm,
doesn't make any sense. And he said, because they're impressionable and they're easy to manipulate. And the
mhm.
conservatives, they don't play games. So he said, of course we're going to go to them. And then we go in there and we take over. Simple as that. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow, and then they have to do what they're told. I have friends in the UK. One of them started UKIP. I forget what it stands for, United Kingdom Independent Party or something like that. And he's out in the streets every day protesting.
Yeah.
He's running that party, fighting for to the identity of the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
And he's that much of the majority. I mean, there's nothing. He has like zero impact. I used to live in the UK. I loved it. I would never live there full time, but I lived there, about a year, and it was enough. But I loved it when I was there. But it's unrecognizable now. I'm scared to even go because of the things that I said. Because now there's a law there that they can actually take you as a foreigner who flies into their country at immigration. They can put you in jail for what you posted on social media,
Oh
even though you're
yeah.
not a citizen. Yeah. So
Yeah.
me as a and I could fly there for a speech because I do a lot of speeches on M&A. I could fly there and they could put me in jail for whatever post that I did or some video that I made. And
Mhm.
it's just like what? It's just like Marie Le Pen. Marie Le Pen, she was in the European Union and she was in her national government. And there's two separate budgets. Well, they were conflated. So she used a little bit of this for that, and a little bit of this for that. Um, like every other politician, period, does. It's like accepted. but they needed to find some on her, so they charged her with embezzling funds from the European Union to her national, or other way around. I can't remember, but I think it was the European Union to the national party to pay her party employees from the European Union budget, therefore stealing money from Europe. And so that's what they got her for. They just made it up because every politician does it,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's widely accepted and absolutely normal. It goes to you either way. So, and whether it's right or wrong isn't even the case. The case is that everyone does it. So that doesn't mean it's right. It's just that it's everyone does it. But they chose to bring her up on charges so they could keep her out. AFD in Germany, the AFD in Germany is the most popular party in Germany right now, and they're trying to ban it. And it's funny because they had this what's called a Gutachten, which is a an analysis of the party, years and years of research, and they brought it, made it public to the press, but they wouldn't show it to the AFD. They wouldn't give it to the party to read it. Finally, they got to read it, and it says in there, not racist, not right wing, not it's all not. So they can't be banned. So what are they doing now? They're the majority party, or they're almost the majority. They're like 2% below the majority, and this party's only less than 10 years old, by the way. Fastest growing party in history, Germany, New Germany, after the war. And they put them in this room, right, in the parliament, which is way too small. They're literally sitting on top of each other. So they have one table and they have chairs on both sides, looking at each other, rows and rows and rows of it. And there's people standing in the back on chairs and stair tables. There's no room for them to work. They're literally mobbing them, trying to mob them out of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And this is public knowledge. And Beatrix von Storch is the vice chair. She's actually the arm, the real power behind the party. Alice Fiedel, she's the spokesperson. She's the lesbian pretty face that goes out there and talks, and it's good because everyone says she's right wing, but she's a lesbian. How can she be? That kind of stuff. That's sort of the thing behind
Which
it.
is crazy. They do
And,
that here
yeah,
too. How can you be black and be right wing? How can you be gay? How
yeah,
can you be,
yeah.
it's crazy.
And so what I'm saying is they're not right wing. They're
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
conservatives. They're like, look, Germany for Germans. I know when someone says that, it sounds like the old school, but it's not like that, right? And of course, just like with Trump, you have idiots on the far, far right that hang on to it and they ruin it for everybody. You have that everywhere. You just have to denounce them. And the problem with politics is when you denounce them, then and people don't know where that line is and they feel themselves included. You might have then people that work for you that are now against you. So it's this whole like, I can't say, but this is what I mean kind of thing. It's a mess, and they wouldn't even vacate their chairs in Parliament for the AFD, even though they lost.
Mhm.
The
Wow.
parties who lost, they wouldn't even leave. They wouldn't leave the Parliament. Like I'm
Yeah.
talking for a month
That's
because
crazy.
they didn't want the AFD to get in power. So it's a and I mean honestly, they put them on talk shows. They put Beatrix on a talk show, and then they have like two liberals there, or whoever, and she starts talking. They just cut her mic.
Hmm.
It's like she can't even say anything.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's in your
Mhm.
face. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's
It's
very
crazy.
obvious. Yeah. They do
And
the
then you
same thing
have,
in Spain. Yeah. It's
yeah, Spain. You
yeah.
have Brazil. Don't even get me started on Brazil. Bolsonaro and oh my lord, what's going on down there is ridiculous. And actually, it almost happened in Chile also, which was very hush hush. But in the last minute, friends of mine were able to mobilize the conservatives to make sure that it didn't have the left take over, the
Wow.
global takeover. And so I don't know how long that's going to last, but it's. I feel like I'm talking too much. I feel like I'm saying
Oh,
too
not
much.
at all. Not at all. I think it's
I'm
great.
saying I'm saying too much, like too much information. Like
Oh,
I've
I see. Yeah. No, no, no.
never spoken openly
That,
about this stuff before, so I
that's
feel
always
embarrassed.
the risk, when you get comfortable, but it's yeah, yeah, I understand. What are your thoughts on speaking of Brazil? What are your thoughts about BRICS? There was a lot of talk about it early on, and India, I guess, has decided to pull out. But for a long time, there was this discussion that they're going to have a system. They already do kind of have a system outside of SWIFT.
Yep.
Do you think it's going to move forward, and do you think it's going to be a real threat to the Western system?
Well, I think it was originally also based on the power of the oil, power of the dollar to oil, and the reserve currency and stuff. They wanted to start their own reserve currency, and Trump is there to make sure that doesn't happen. Right? That's why he's making all these deals, among other things. That's one of the reasons he's making all these deals, so it doesn't happen. So I don't know where it's going. I don't know enough about it. Don't know anybody involved really directly. So it's hard to say, but it looks to me like it's crumbling a little bit. It hasn't, it's not center stage anymore. There's other things that people are worrying about. And the America First concept that Trump is pushing, like you said, overwhelmed with action, seems to be working, regardless of what we're hearing. It seems to be working, and there are some things that I question, like American citizens with American passports being deported. That's sort of weird. Not sure how that
Or
happens.
also native born Americans who were anchor babies, as they say. Now they're trying to change that. I do question that as well, because that was always the law. I mean, in fact, because I was not born in the United States, but my family
Yeah.
goes back over 500 years in the United States. But people would bust my balls when I was growing up, because they'd say, oh, yeah, you'll never be president. My dad would always, when they would tell him in Spain, they'd say, your son will never be president. And he'd say, no, but he might be caudillo. The.
Yeah, well, it's strange because you have people that have never lived in another country. Now they're being deported. It's like I don't know what to do in Ecuador or Mexico or wherever I'm going. I've never been there. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know.
Yeah.
So it's not even it's collateral damage is what it is. They're trying to do a broad sweep, but I don't know. It's just I think some of the actors they brought in who are supposed to be disconnected from the swamp, as they call it, might not be the best, most talented individuals for the job. I'm not going to bust anybody out, but I certainly would take a position and try to do my best if I ever was asked to do it at that level. I mean, I was suggested by the German government for two positions in Trump transition team 2016, and I got damn close. I talked to the people in charge, and they interviewed me, and some things happened here and there, and then ended up not happening. And same thing with this administration now, with one of the larger members, one of the more well-known members. He had my CV and my bio and wanted to talk to me, and then that got shut down by certain people because I wasn't in the club, if you will. So it's a
That's
closed system.
always the risk. I mean, we're trying to stay. I'm anti-tribal, and that's why um, people will say to me, "Are you a Trump guy?" And I'll say no, because um, I'll follow as long as I agree with his policies. I'll support them, but I don't support any figure, because they can betray me at any moment, and
Yeah, yeah,
it,
exactly. It's about the policies and the results. I mean, Trump's famous for creating conflict just to get people's attention, and
Mhm.
he's a master being in the news every single day.
Yeah,
And the left thinks they're doing him a disservice by putting him on the news every day. They're not.
yeah, yeah,
They're emboldening him.
yeah.
That's what he wants. And so he can talk about any issue he wants, and he'll make an outlandish remark, and the next thing you know, everybody's, oh my God, you heard what he said. That's exactly what he wants you to do, and they just keep falling for it. They keep doing it, you know. So, and it's just puzzling to me how absolutely emotionally outraged people are, even when you talk like we're talking right now. They just cannot control themselves. I
Yeah.
sat, I was flying. I sat beside this lady on the plane, and she goes, "Oh my God, you're a Trump supporter." Just looking at me,
Mhm.
I was like, "Is it that obvious? What is that? I'm a conservative?" She goes, "Yeah, look at you. You're big, you're buff, and all this kind of stuff. You look like a typical conservative." This is in Hungary, by the way, flying to I don't know where it's flying, Dubai maybe. And I was like, "Why do you say that?" And we just started talking. And by the end of the flight, she was like, "You're the first conservative I've ever spoken to that I like."
It's so crazy. It's
Well, it's
yeah,
because I didn't argue with her. I
yeah,
didn't argue. I didn't care what she said about me. It didn't bother me. I didn't say whatever you want. I want to know why you're saying that. Where's it coming from? Like,
yeah.
okay, so you think that about me. I accept that. That's fine. But why do you think? What's behind that? And
And I found
what
that,
she said,
yeah.
what she said made sense,
Mhm,
but her source of info was, of course, not true. So
mhm.
try to tell somebody that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I can
You're the
always
guy.
debunk stuff when you get accused of being a racist, sexist, whatever. Anybody who knows me knows none of those things are true. But
Yeah,
I personally come from the left. I come from the suburbs of LA, where everybody's on the left. And but I found in the bars, in local bars, when we would have arguments with the local guys. We had a bar in my town that was kind of like a Cheers bar, but much smaller scale. But everybody knew each other, and there was the right wingers and there were the left wingers. But when I argued with the right wingers, they never made it personal, and they
Yeah.
never came after me on a personal level. The left wingers sooner or later would get resort to insults. Okay, well, that's
Yeah.
because of your privilege, or that's because you're
Yeah.
white. You don't get it because you're
Yeah.
heterosexual male, white. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I,
Yeah.
I
It's
can't
true.
see suffering because it's kind of
Right. So how do we, as conservatives or people that, I don't even want to say I'm conservative. I'm just someone who wants, freedom to live and live my life and enjoy my family and make enough money to survive and thrive maybe even.
Mhm.
How do we deal with that? Is we deal with that calmly and compassionately and understand that they're in a place where I was a Democrat until the second Obama term. His first term turned me into a Republican. you know, so I was a diehard Democrat all the way through the military when I was in the military days. Um, I mean, I loved Clinton, and it was like he was like my man. But how do we deal with that kind of thing? It's up to us, man. It really is, because the conservative leaders aren't doing it for us. We have to do it, and there's more of us than there are of them as far as leadership goes. We have 100 senators. I mean, like, hello. We look at us. We're millions and millions and millions of people. If we got our shit together and quit, peeing each other's cornflakes, we'd be a reckonable force, a force to be reckoned with. And I don't mean revolution. I mean standing your ground, saying no, no,
Yeah.
we're not doing that. You know,
I don't know if you've seen the recent video of Marco Rubio, where he was being questioned on a bunch of things, and he pushed back. He pushed back with Van Holland and others in a way that he seemed stronger. It's sort of the inverse of what we saw with Dan Bongino and um,
Cash
Cash
Patel.
Patel. Is that, yeah? Basically, he seems emboldened and also um, well informed, but not afraid. Not afraid. Too often, when people get grilled in these Senate hearings and these Congress hearings, um, they're on the defense and not on the offense, and they don't push back. And of course, what the senators and the congressmen always do is, if you talk too much and you say no, well, that's not true. In fact, you're the one that was corrupt, and they say, I reclaim my time.
The time, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and they'll try and push them to just do, yes or no,
Yeah.
yes or no, and then they ask a question like, yes or no, why did you rape that woman? I didn't rape that woman. That's not a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
Yes
Yeah.
or no. It's like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? But yeah, it's all theater, and people are seeing it more, especially young people. I think, So I'm hopeful for the future, but I don't know.
Well, that's the old trick, isn't it? When we started our coalition in Germany, we didn't have any influence. We just had ideas.
Mhm.
And so we looked at the election polls and who won by a small margin and in the different districts and around Germany, and we would write them a letter. And this is the days of actual hard copy mail, snail mail that we would use. A little bit of internet, but mostly snail mail. And so we would send a letter and say, look, we see in this issue that you're for. At the time, it was uh, for the reunification when Germany reunified. Chancellor Kohl told the German people that the stipulation from Gorbachev was that they cannot give the land back in the East to the rightful owners who now are living in the West. Right, so repatriation, whatever it's called. And we were fighting to get that into the coalition contract with the new government. And so these people who voted against it, that had a small margin of winning the election, their election, we wrote them and said, hey, are you for putting this in the coalition contract or not? Yes or no? Of course, they would write an answer, which was always no, most of the time. And so we'd write it back and we would publish all of their answers, our questions and their answers, we'd publish them. And then we would write in our newsletter, well, since he said no, pick up your red cards. In soccer, they have red cards, right? You do something wrong. So we printed these red cards, thousands of them, and it said, I will not vote for you. I do not support you because you won't put this in the coalition contract. Da, 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 da. And they signed it. And they would each send him 5 red cards. So this politician would be like, who's the arrogance of this? They'd get like thousands of red cards in their office, and then they'd call us like, who the hell are you guys? Who do you think you are? You think you can influence elections and things like that? Right? Look, this is the people talking to you. These are people who are voting for you. And the first guy who lost because of that, everyone else stepped in line after that. They understood that we actually work for the people. And that's why the AFD grew so large, so quick, because the people, we do what the people say, or they do. I can't say we because I'm not in the party, because I'm American. They do what the people want, and they actually do what the people want, which is unheard of in politics these days. And so when I look at the AFD, and of course there's some cuckoos in there who are just using it for their own power. But Beatrix, for instance, I know her since she was, a student, and now she's this world leader, and she's really passionate, and so is her husband Sven von Storch, who's basically the man behind the whole thing. He's a chief strategist. He consults like Bolsonaro, the governments of South America, Bannon, Trump. He consults all of them. Right? This is like the chief strategist, probably one of the best political strategists in the world. He's my best friend. So we talk every day, at least message every day, and he tells me all this stuff that's happening. And they really fight, and they actually take what the people want, and they go out and do it, which is unheard of. And it's driving the establishment crazy because they're growing like crazy. Like they went from fifth strongest party to second strongest party in 3 years.
Wow.
3 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's with election interference. We tested it, or I keep saying we, but they tested it. They went to small towns in the north where there was only 50 people, and they had people who videotaped themselves voting for the AFD, film themselves, and then when the results came out, there was no votes for the AFD. We just did stitch tests, they call them, like point tests everywhere, and
It
it's just
seems like it's a shift. There's a shift happening around the world, like in Argentina, of course, in El Salvador, which is a tiny country, but seems to be making a lot of news because
yeah,
of their changes and because of their alliance with the United States and because of what they've done in terms of, I mean, yeah, they're the size of Israel or the size of New Jersey, but they've booted out the gangs supposedly, and for law-abiding citizens in that country, it seems like a much better place. From what I understand, back in the day, not that
yeah,
long ago, you couldn't leave the house to go to the store without a machete because you were ready to be assaulted. Women couldn't walk on the street by themselves.
yeah.
Um, but a lot of people are calling him a dictator and saying a lot of terrible things about him as well.
Again, let him be a dictator.
Yeah, yeah,
Honest to God, like
yeah.
people say, I live in Turkey. Oh, Erdogan's a dictator. Well, let me tell you something. Where I live here, right on the south, I'm looking at the Mediterranean right now. It's literally 100 meters from me, right? Where I live, I haven't seen in 3 years one road rage incident, one crime, one argument, nothing. The kids are safe. They walk down the street by themselves at 10 o'clock at night. Every adult's eyes are on this kid to make sure he's safe. It is the most peaceful place, orderly, calm. There's two genders. There's mom and dad and kids. It's clear. It's clean. The nuclear family is intact. There's respect for elders. There's even a word for it in Turkish. Abi means older brother. Any man that's older than you, call him abi, and that means that's a great respect. Saying big brother. It's intact here. So tell me, do you want to live in Detroit, Chicago, LA, New York City, or do you want to live here? You know what I mean? Like for me. And then there's like private schools that they're cheaper than public schools in America. You know, and very high end, good education. Yeah, it's a poor country, but there's a rising middle class, and people say, "Oh, inflation's at a hyperinflation." Yeah, the $1 was 17 lira when I got here. Now it's 38 lira for a dollar. But as the inflation goes up, they raise the wages, the minimum wage. So the minimum wage has gone up 3x since I got here, right? And so they're trying to make it work. They're trying to, but you have the leftists in here. Like, I don't know if you heard about the mayor of Istanbul that got put in jail. He was the opposition against Erdogan, which is the prime minister, the president. And everybody's like, "Oh, look what they're doing! They're putting the opposition in jail." Well, he was a globalist puppet. He was corrupt. He was taking money. He was paying people off. All this kind of stuff, which is what the the globalists do. That's what they did in Romania. That's what they're doing in Poland right now. That's what they did in France. Well, he said, no, not in my country. So he put him in jail.
Yeah.
Like, look, he's a dictator. No shit.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Well, finally, someone takes control and says, no, not in my country. And
Yeah.
so you have the younger generation here who believes the hype, who believes the TV. There's liberal press here as well that sort of puts that stuff. As a matter of fact, the other day in school, my son was doing doing homework, and in his homework, he's in fifth grade. It was saying something about how can we make the planet better? It was talking about global warming and how not to eat too much meat. And I was like, no. I wrote a letter over it. I said, I want to talk to the director ASAP because that shit's not happening, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like,
By the
so
way, in terms of the education system there, because I know that, you know, I mostly went to school in the United States, but we moved back to Spain when I was in high school, um, and I learned then how poor my education was because they told my parents that, you know, we were only going to be there until the end of the year, so they said, well, we'll pass him, but if he was going to stay here to graduate, we would need to hold him back at least a year. I mean, my math skills were behind,
yeah,
I everything was behind, and then I
yeah.
came back after, and I was ahead, you know, but I it taught me, you know, it's crazy.
Well, over 50% of Americans can't spell.
Hmm. Yeah.
50%. They can't spell. You see it on Instagram. Sometimes I don't even know what the hell they're writing when they comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously. It's like, what is he trying to say? What is she trying to say? It's a, look at America. Bridges, roads, I mean, railways, but it's horrible. It's like, it's crushing. They have the worst, one of the worst in the Western society, all Western countries, one of the worst broadband coverage, right? And that's why Verizon, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? You know what I mean? That's actually reality.
Hmm.
Like that doesn't happen. You know, for instance, in Europe, you can't go anywhere where you don't have a signal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, of course, it's much smaller, but still, if you look at the crumbling infrastructure in America, that it's a scary. Plus, we build everything out of wood, and you know, you build a house out of wood, and then you trash it, and I move somewhere else and just leave it stand. You know, they have, not in Turkey. They rebuild apartment buildings every 40 years or so. They just tear them down. They pay for your new apartment, and they build it again, and you rent it again, whatever. So, like they're always renewing. But in Europe, I lived in a, I lived in an apartment in Zurich, Switzerland that was older than America.
Wow.
Isn't that, yeah,
Yeah.
isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was my apartment, and I was like, this apartment building is older than America. It was
Mhm.
525 years old.
Wow. Wow.
You know, the building. And
Yeah.
so America's like, quick, consume, next, consume, build, tear down, next. It's all temporary. It's all like quick and easy and try to make it quick and everybody makes a buck and that kind of stuff. And I see that from the outside. I'm not talking crap about my country. I love my country. I fought for my country. I risked my life for my country. I almost died for my country. Lost a buddy in Iraq in my arms. Went through hell, PTSD, still to this day, which I battle big time.
Mhm.
Um, which is why I'm able to stay so calm. Because if I'm not, I get excited and I go a little crazy. So I have to stay calm. And you know, so I'm not talking trash about my country, but man, people need to wake up. We're not the greatest country on the planet. Maybe we're the most powerful,
Mhm.
but by
Yeah.
far we are not technologically the number one. Definitely not infrastructure number one. You know, when it comes to IT and stuff like that, we're not bad, right?
Mhm.
We're not number one. So it's about the attitude that we have, you know. And then if you look at food, let's not even get there. But you know,
Yeah.
just like McDonald's, for instance, McDonald's fries has 4 ingredients here in the rest of the world. In America, it's got 11. So it's just as an example that'll give you what's happening in America. Like I have a twin brother.
Mhm.
He looks 15 years older than me.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just because of he can't get good, clean food.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, and it's a shame. Like when we go to America for 2 weeks, I'm like, I got to get out of here, man. Like I'm starting to taste metal in my mouth. Like this is, I feel like I'm in some kind of like matrix or something. It's so you can't get real food.
Yeah. It's all
We
process.
yeah, we try to go to the Amish and say, "Hey, got any beef? You know, got any chicken?" Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I've been talking a lot to veterans lately. I have a couple buddies that are veterans that I had on a little while ago. And every veteran I talk to is against war because they've seen it firsthand. Um, we seem to be lately on the precipice of a world war between frictions with Iran, for a while with China, with Taiwan, yeah, Taiwan, or
Taiwan.
was it Taiwan? Yeah,
Taiwan.
and the Houthis, which supposedly Trump has declared victory over, you know. But do you have hope for the future in terms of wars? I don't think the United States is going to get involved any further in the Ukraine war, but NATO is still promising. They're making all these promises to bring in troops and money, and I don't know where they're going to get it from. It's I don't know. What are your thoughts
It's
on
just it's a stroke of a key. That's all it is anymore.
that? Yeah, yeah,
They just oh, add another zero. There you go. Dook, done.
yeah.
That's how banks do it.
But I mean,
So
is France or uh, Germany going to send troops to Ukraine?
let's see. Here's the deal. Europe doesn't have an army.
Hmm.
Each country has their own army. So when Europe says we're going to send, who are they going to fight for? The European flag? No, hell no. No one's going to die for the European flag. It's a flag of no country,
Hmm.
right? So what they're doing right now is they're trying to talk you into um, fighting for your freedom of your country. So uh, Putin is threatening Germany. We have to go fight him, or Germany's lost. So they're going away from the European narrative just so people go to war. They even had a TV commercial of an 18-year-old girl in the Bundeswehr in the German army uniform saying, I would gladly die for my country. They had a commercial like that. And I'm thinking like, holy shit. And now they have like the old VW plants that are being shut down and stuff. They're turning them into weapons factories. And, it's all a money grab again, you know. And the French, the Foreign Legion goes wherever they're told anyway. But, they don't have, or they have their own armies, but they don't have an army as European. They tried it. They've tried the European division or the European battalion, and it never works because they all speak different languages.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so the thing about war is, if I say to you, get down, you can't question it. What'd you say? You're dead.
Hmm.
I don't understand. What did he say? You're dead. So you have to have that speed of implementation when you're in war, when you're in battle. Number one. Number two, you need different leaders in wartime than you do in peacetime. Look at Patton, for instance. Patton was an absolute wartime leader, but when the peace came, they had to get rid of him because he was a nutcase,
Hmm.
right? That's what they called him. He was a nutcase. He's like, he's too aggressive. Well, yeah, he just won, helped win the war. So
Yeah.
then you needed him then. Now you don't need him. And the same thing goes in the world now today, or even in business. You need, for scale and grow, you need someone different than someone who's going to maintain. So all these things play a role. I think that I don't. It's just I feel like Putin and Trump are up to something.
Yeah, I
You know,
was gonna say, and hopefully a good thing because yeah,
yeah.
but both of them. I mean, what Trump keeps saying is when they ask him, because they ask him these loaded questions again, they say, "Well, do you want Putin to win?" Then, and he said, "I want people to stop dying." Which is an honest answer. And he said, and he now he's even saying it's not Americans dying, it's Russians and Ukrainians dying, but these are still lives, and these are people that could.
Well, if you look at the big picture, Putin and Trump are fighting the same people.
Hmm. Yeah,
They're
yeah.
fighting the World Bank, they're fighting the loaded loans, they're fighting the World Economic Forum, they're fighting all of these globalist organizations, the Soros, the NGOs, all these kind of things. And so is Hungary, by the way, and Romania was.
Hmm.
Um, so if they're all fighting the same people and they're all being um, labeled an existential threat to democracy, that sort of leads me to believe that they're sort of on the same team,
Hmm.
which scares the hell out of a lot of people because Putin's a bad man, right? And he probably is a bad man. But if you go to his country, it's much to the chagrin of most people, not like they say it is. There's an exodus of Westerners moving to Russia. There's actually Instagram channels, move to Russia.
Yeah,
And you have all these Westerners on there being interviewed about why they love it there. And it's
yeah.
always the same thing. What I said, it's safe, family values, kids are,
Clean
it's like,
food. Yeah.
yeah, clean food, exactly,
Yeah.
and cheap as like crazy. It's not cheap there anymore, but it used to be. But it's super cheap there, like 9 cents for an egg or some shit. It's like super cheap.
Yeah.
And so all of this and all these narratives, I think people just should make their own decisions based on something other than what the talking heads are telling you. Talk to people, man. Like it's the world. We're connected.
Yeah.
Go on to try to find some kind of, I don't know, some group in Russia on Reddit, whatever their version of Reddit is, and say, hey, I'm American. What's going on?
Yeah. That was
You
what
know,
I always wanted to do when I was a teenager. When we got back to the States, I wanted to subscribe to the Russian newspaper. I think it was called Pravda. I can't remember. But my dad said no. And I said, why not? And he said, because you're going to get on a list and you don't want to
yeah,
get on a list. And he was right. And I was like, you're crazy, Liz. It's the land of the free, home of the brave. We have lists. Yeah.
yeah,
And if you get on it, they're not good lists. They're shit lists. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, I've moved east my whole life. I went from America to Western Europe, from Western Europe to Eastern Europe, from Eastern Europe to Middle East,
Yeah.
West Middle East, but still
Yeah.
Middle
You're
East.
literally on the cusp between East and West. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm, a couple hundred miles from Europe, basically. You know,
My dad loves Turkey, by the way. He was a Spanish professor for years, and when he retired, he learned Turkish, and he ended up spending time there. Went to school there as a retiree. Ended up translating Orhan Pamuk's autobiography. So he has a
wow,
great love. I think Turkish is. I mean, I speak Spanish fluently, and I can fake French and Italian, but I think Turkish is over my head. I mean, I try, and I'm just like, oh,
it's tough. It's tough. It's
breaks
tough.
my brain.
My wife speaks it fluently, which cracks me up, but it's tough. It really is. My
Yeah.
wife's been 14 years now, so
You
um,
mentioned the digital euro, which I think they're implementing in October. Is that right? Do you think they're trying to get away with from cash altogether and get rid of cash? They had this plan in the United States, but it's clearly not going to happen over under Trump. He's actually promoting crypto, which is surprising, but we'll see if there's an alternate reason for that as well. I mean, he does have his own Trump coin and that kind of thing. Um, do you think that they're going to get rid of cash in Europe?
well, they like for instance, Sweden's been cashless for at least 5 years, 7 years, something like that. They've already been cashless. A lot of places they won't even take. They won't even. You can't even pay cash if you wanted to. Now, remember, you have Hungary, for instance. They don't have the euro, even though they're in the European Union. They're not in the European Monetary Union. And in Hungary, they're definitely not getting rid of cash anytime soon because 80% of what you do there is like just under the table. You know what I mean? So I don't know what's going to happen, but in the West, definitely Germany is the forerunner. Germany, France, Belgium, all those places, they're the forerunners for this whole, if you would call it the globalist digital movement. Where I mean, look, think about it. Your money's all digital now, and they go, "Hey, you were a bad man. We saw you walk across the red light. It was the little green man was red, and you walked. Well, sorry, you don't have your money for 2 days." When Cyprus went under, I don't know when it was, 10 years ago or whatever it was. I had friends on there because Cyprus is a tax-free haven. It's like an LLC in
Mhm.
Cyprus. It's like set up in Vegas. Basically, it's like a tax benefits.
Yeah, like the
And
Isle of Man or
yeah,
Andorra, or yeah,
exactly. Well, when they locked it down, you couldn't take out more than 200 euros a week from your bank account. And they're like, "That's my
how do
business,"
I
you know.
eat? Yeah,
Yeah, and it was the first sign of wow, if they want to, they can just take everything away from you.
yeah,
That's why these decentralized platforms are quite interesting. Even now, like when people pay me, it's always hung up somewhere. American banks are a disaster. Even like 10K, it's like, oh, we got to keep it 3 days, AML, KYC, all this kind of shit. But there's decentralized platforms out there. Some people say crypto is the way to go. I have a friend who's, he's like a bull market specialist and he's making, hundreds of millions of dollars on this. And he's trying to talk me into it. I'm like, dude, I don't have the time to even think about it, but I guess I have to sooner or later.
yeah. Just as a backup plan, I would never. I mean, because it is in a certain to a certain extent gambling because you don't know whether it's going to go up and down. But so is the stock market. So I wouldn't put in more than you can risk
Yeah.
losing. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's good to have a backup in case they do freeze your assets or something. I just heard recently, well, not too recently, but a few months ago, that in Spain now, they passed a law that if you travel to Spain, if you stay in a hotel, they have this questionnaire that you legally have to fill out that gives all your personal data, including bank account information and the relationship you have with the person that you're traveling with, all kinds of stuff. And it's kind of crazy. I don't know if that's going to last, or if that's I would think they would people would stop going to Spain if they want to know everything about you, your blood type,
Well, that's
your
the problem is that people won't stop. If they want to go on vacation, have fun, and go get drunk and lay on the beach, that's what they do. They don't care what they have to do to get there, and
yeah.
that's a big problem. I mean, I the comfort that we as Westerners have been accustomed to is is a big curse for us because we willingly give everything up easily because we're
Yeah.
used to get what we want and when we want it and how we want it. COVID was a perfect example where people are like, "What? I can't. What do you mean I can't?" Hell, I traveled during COVID because I have residencies everywhere. I have German residency, I have Hungarian residency, I have Turkish. Then I didn't have Turkish, and of course American. So I could travel freely because they had to let you go where you have a residency. So I could travel freely and openly. But most people couldn't do that. So they were like, "What? How?" And that woke a lot of people up because that comfort wasn't there anymore. That ease of I'm going here and that's it. That's my right. Well, not anymore.
Yeah.
It's
And that kind of destroyed the economy too, because
yeah,
a lot of people had to shut down their businesses, and then they're like, well, if you're going to do that, then you need to pay people to stay at home, and, just keep printing money, keep selling those bonds.
you talked about the rise of the populist in South America and in Europe and things like that, and that's why it's the left has accelerated it so quickly with everything else because they see they have to beat the clock. I'm hopeful though that America is uh, has a lot of influence in the world,
Mhm.
and he seems to be using it to our advantage, also his, but our advantage as Americans. When you look at what he did in UAE and the deals that he made in Qatar, and I mean it's pretty crazy. The largest deals ever made, you know,
Yeah.
trillions of
And a
dollars.
lot of that was, I mean, David Sachs, I saw him recently on, and he was talking about how a lot of it has to do with AI, which we're battling against China for, and we want all of our equipment out there instead of theirs because we want to dominate that
Yeah,
market. It's logical, um, strategic. It
yeah.
makes sense no matter what side of the aisle you're on, but people might, I don't know what. Well, some people are saying that either way, if we have our servers in Dubai, then China possibly would have access to it. But they can't even reverse uh, strategize or reverse design their own AI based on ours because of the way it's set up. From what I understand.
Well, and that won't matter when super intelligence comes out
Yeah.
because when super intelligence comes out, they do like 1 billion years worth of calculations in a second.
Yeah.
So you just set it on the server and go figure it out.
Mhm.
So I don't know
And that
what's going
goes
to happen.
back to warfare too, because I had a panel. I have a panel that comes on for every few months, and we talk about what's going on in the world in terms of war, U.S. conflicts. One of them was actually he's British, but he fought with the Kurds in Syria, and another one is an ex-Navy SEAL. I was trying to get a CIA guy on. I'll have to ask you to come on if you can, because it would be interesting. But and I have a woman who's with the Quincy Institute, which is anti-war, and we discussed the status of peace and war. And one of the things that Amir Taki stated was that the race right now militarily is for AI because that's the next new battleground and the way that we're going to conduct our wars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Until they find a way to make as much money as they make producing weapons, they're going to keep fighting the ground. Because people ask them, like, you ask yourself, like, why are we still like man to man shooting?
Mhm.
But we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, why are we doing that? Because it makes money.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
makes money, and it's the only way they still know how. So until they have something that replaces that, in billions and billions of dollars, it's just. And again, I mean, I have friends who sell weapons legally through the U.S. government, and they're killing it.
Yeah.
They're killing, and it's like, Steve, man, this is my job. What am I supposed to do? And I get it, you know,
Mhm.
but I mean, if it, I just want my world to be safe. I want my kids to grow up safe. I want my wife to be able to walk down the street safe. I don't want to have to worry about, is the plane going to get shot down? Am I going to be arrested when I land in England? Am I, all these things. It's it's unsettling, but you can't let it get to you. Otherwise you go crazy,
Yeah.
so
And
uh,
ultimately, I think this is why you're doing this too. Like you said, basically, in order for it to be safe, it, you have to have a safe world because if your country, the country you're in, is safe, but no place else is, it's gonna
Yeah.
creep in, you know. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
And it's I like I said, I don't even know why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it. Just started. I started and it happened and people liked it and I kept going. It's an ease for me. It's not that difficult for me. I just, based on, you know, 25 years of politics and I mean like I was in the Croatian parliament helping them structure a way to set up their veterans program for the Balkan War. Because when you got to realize, what people don't realize is you had like Serbians and Croats and Yugoslavia. Um, they were neighbors. They used to walk out, hey, morning Joe, morning Jim, or whatever. The next day they're shooting at each other, and then a couple years later they're neighbors again. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And these guys, they're really messed up. They got 5 grand and they were done. Like here's 5 grand, you're out of the army, see you later. And that was it. No treatment, no follow up, no nothing. So a lot of these guys are really hurt. And when I showed up there, they clung to me like I was their last hope. And I was like, and I can't, like, I don't have any, I can only give suggestions.
Mhm.
And so I was working with the parliament to try to figure out a way to make them have some kind of organization where they could go to and talk about the problems, stuff like that. And like, I did things like I worked for Olivia Newton-John, Andrea Bocelli, Mick Jagger, all these things that I never had any business doing because I had no experience.
Mhm.
But what I had was certainty in my abilities to deploy my genius in any given situation. And that served me so well. Matter of fact, it's something that I wrote about in my book, which I'll selflessly plug
Oh
here.
yes, absolutely. Unleash your humble alpha. I love it.
Yeah, it's on Audible and it's on Amazon as well. And in this book, it talks about your identity, who you are, really, not what you do. Like if someone says, "You know who I am? I'm the CEO." Actually, no, that's not who you are. That's what you do. Who are you? What do you mean? Yeah, they don't know. It's that, and it's about your purpose in life, and then how your purpose amplifies your identity, which gives you presence, and presence comes through being present in the moment, showing up wholly and fully for the people in front of you, with focusing on the only thing that you can control, and that's the intention of adding value by solving problems. And that's why when I show up for my videos, that's my intention. I want to add value and solve problems. It's not, I want this specific outcome. I want this. I want to make money. It's not that at all. It's the intention that matters. And I think that's why the videos come across so well because I'm not pushing for anything. I don't have a specific outcome in mind. So I'm hoping that this comes across as positive. I'm hoping that I don't get in trouble.
I doubt you will. I don't have a following that would actually get you in trouble unless the algorithm picks it up and then all of a sudden. But if it goes on Jimmy Dore, it'd probably be a good thing anyway, or
Yeah.
any of those because basically the media, the left wing media is not going to pick it up. They're not interested in
Yeah.
dissenting voices. They're I mean they're pushing the narrative that they didn't know that Biden was had dementia. It's like we all
Yeah.
saw it.
And again, it's like anyone with a third grade education would look at that guy and be like, something's not right.
Mhm.
And so people lying to your face, man, constantly in our press, our politicians, our media, other leaders, community leaders, even your friends, like Biden was the best president we ever had. What do you mean he know his own name for the last 2 years? Like, how can you say that? Like literally, like honestly, be honest with yourself. You saw him. I saw him. He didn't know what he was saying, you know? And now they're pulling that on Trump. Oh, he's senile. Look, he's saying this instead of that, and he doesn't know what he's saying, that kind of stuff. And it's just it baffles me to no end to look at someone in their eye and they're lying to you and they know they're lying to you and they do it with full belief
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
justify. It's a
yeah.
means to an end. We have to end Trump. We have to get him out. He's a
And
danger
it's
to our.
funny, yeah, because he has to, and I'm sure you've been through this in business. I have. I worked for a bunch of different .coms and different, and some people will say terrible things about you. And I mean, I was in the music industry. I was a singer for years and years, and stuff like that would happen as well. And my wife would be like, because then I would get together with these people for drinks, and she'd say, "How can you be around these people after all these terrible things that you said?" And I said, "Well, you can't take it personal." Like in The Godfather, it's not personal, it's just business, but they'll attack you on every level. And then you say, well, how could you say that? And they just kind of smile and go, well, I was trying to get
Just,
rid of you so I
yeah,
could take this spot. You know why
yeah,
I did it,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I just it. and I think, people say, I'm going to ignore everything and just live my life, and I get that, and I do that in a way as well. But I think if we all could just do a little bit, I do a video a day, 5 minutes. That's my bit, and I talk to people in my circle of influence, and I explain to them where I'm coming from. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. If we all did that, just imagine the wave of change we could find. And it sounds maybe for some people that's utopian, gura and all that kind of stuff. And I don't mean that. I really mean just like a conversation like we're having right now. And if enough people did that, we would see a wave of change that could actually make a difference in our world and make it a place that we want to live again, make it a place that we're happy to live again. I mean, everyone says that. Every generation says, "Oh, it used to be so great," that kind of stuff. But I remember growing up, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was booming. Of course, I didn't have the awareness that I do now. But
Yeah.
even after I had the awareness in Germany, for instance, from when I got there in '93 after the military, I had been there since '86 in the military. But when I got out as a civilian, I freaking loved it, man. I loved it. It
Yeah.
was heaven. It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
And being an American in Europe, I mean, I know from experience too, everybody always says everybody hates us, but that's not true. I mean, when I was in Spain or anywhere in Europe, I could be at a bar by myself and people would say, "Where are you from?" And I'd say, "The United States." And they'd say, "Let me buy you a beer." And they want to
Exactly.
know all about, what's it like? It was,
Yeah.
you were a
Same thing
superstar.
here. Same
Yeah.
thing in Turkey.
Yeah.
People on social are like, "Why you live in a Muslim country? How can you do? Are you Muslim? I guess you're Muslim." And I'm like, "I'm not, but if I was, what's the big deal?"
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, Turkey is a multi religious. So you have Jews here. You got church. I got like three churches within eyeshot of me.
Mhm.
Christian churches, and no one bothers each other. No one knows no extremists here that are sure there's little cuffs in the mountains of crazies or whatever. But just like you have anywhere, just like you have in the mountains of Kentucky, you got crazies there too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So um, I have to say, I never thought that I'd love Turkey as much as I love it.
That's
You know,
great. Yeah, I'm thinking now because California is not something that's super affordable, which is where I live. And when I retire, I'm trying to figure out where to go. Maybe El Salvador. Maybe I was thinking Europe, just because it's familiar to me. But most of Europe is taxed so highly, and they control what you say. I want to continue doing this even after I retire as well. I've thought maybe of the Isle of Man or something, because that way I could still pop over to Spain whenever every few weeks or whatever. But I hear
well,
great things about Turkey as well.
it is hard to get a living permit here. It
Mm,
is next to impossible. I'm married. My wife's also a Turkish citizen, so I'm married to her, and that's why I got it. But it was before we got married. It was really difficult. I almost didn't make it.
mm,
They are so stringent in the immigration here, like really stringent. And you get it for a year, but you apply, and then you get it like 5 months after you apply. Then you only have 7 months left. You got to apply again. It's like constantly, and it's
mm,
just like it's ridiculous bureaucracy when it comes to immigration. Like it's there, and it just makes you wonder, like who actually wants to come here? Like it isn't like everybody's flowing over the borders to come here. You know what I mean? But they want to keep it homogenous.
Kind of like Poland's doing something similar where they're, you
They
know,
were,
uh,
they
and
were,
it's
yeah.
it makes me think of Judaism because my parents converted to Judaism when I was a child and I was raised Jewish, and uh, it's one of those religions where they don't proselytize, and anybody that wants to, they make it hard for them. They don't make it easy.
Yeah.
They make you jump through a lot of hoops, especially if you want to do it Orthodox. And most countries should be that way. If you really want it, you need to prove it. And you need to.
Well, there was back in 215 when the immigration started into Europe, and in each country we had State Department officials from each country that were in those countries, and they were observers, and they would observe how many people would try to immigrate, who came through the embassy, and all this kind of stuff, and they would look at illegal immigration and stuff like that. Well, before that happened, shortly before the whole immigration thing in 2015, they were all told to stand down.
Mm,
So it was a planned invasion, basically. And it's funny because in Germany, after the Second World War in like the late 50s and up into the early 70s, you had Italians and Turks en masse that went to Germany to rebuild it. Most Italians went home, but the Turks stayed. So the largest population of Turks outside of Turkey is Germany, right? And they were always the bad foreigners. They were always the ones making trouble and all this kind of stuff. Like the Germans looked down upon them, right? They really had a tough time. But they were a big part of the economy because almost all of them are entrepreneurs. Almost every single one of them are entrepreneurs, were entrepreneurs. And now you have like third and fourth generation who were born and raised there, you know, and they're still seen as Turks. They're not seen as Germans. That's the difference between America and the rest of the world, as you probably saw in Spain as well. You know, if you're not born and raised and you're from there, like if you're born and raised in Germany but you have Turkish parents, you're Turkish.
Hmm. Yeah.
And now the Turks are the good foreigners, and the new immigrants are the bad foreigners. And the Turks are complaining about the new foreigners that came. You know, it's like
Yeah.
it's really strange how the dynamics change there. But you know, I I have a lot of friends in Germany. That's where I spent most of my time. I mean, I was like a guest MTV VJ. I did the newscaster. I wrote a best-selling book in Germany. I had cocktail bars, nightclubs, and sports clubs. You know, I think Germany was, I loved it. It was like the place to be. I loved it. And then it started to change, man. I'd leave, you know, and I'm not a fearful person. I love going to countries where I don't know anybody. I don't know the language. I don't know the culture or nothing. I love it. You know, one thing I can say about here is that I don't hear the noise
Mhm.
because I don't speak the language. So I hear what I choose to hear.
Right.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't hear the news or none of that stuff. And if I want to hear, then I look it up. So I'm not inundated with negativity all the time in any country I ever went to because I don't speak the language. So that might sound like I want to be ignorant, but it's not. It's like I choose what I want to, deal. And I'm always an American first.
Hmm.
And I care deeply for my country, and I really want to make sure that my country's on the best path. Is Trump the best we have? He is right now,
Hmm.
right? And the things he's doing shows me that we're going in a radical change quickly. I mean, when I was in business, and it's in the book too, by the way, I talked about disruption. And when I would take over business, that's why I was a turnaround guy. So I would go into a business and I would take it over and I would turn it around and make it from not profitable to profitable in a very short time. And the first thing I did was disrupt. I'd go in and I'd tell everybody, okay, look at the offices and say, okay, everybody who's sitting here is moving into that office, and everybody sitting there is moving into this office, and you're not sitting with the same person you sat before, sit with somebody you've never sat with before. I was like, what the hell is going on? What is this? And then I would have the team get together, clean and paint the office new, and then would show them how it had to be orderly every day. And if anything was out that didn't belong, I'd throw it away. It didn't even matter. I don't care if it was a laptop, I'd throw it away. If it wasn't where it was supposed to be, it'd be gone. I never had to do that because they were too scared that I would, because I was serious.
Yeah.
That disruption was like, okay, something's happening. Then they were open for change. So structural change is like that, but culture change, as you see in America, he's doing structural changes right now, really, really quick with Doge and all that kind of stuff. But that culture change is going to take a while. It takes a lot longer than just a structural change, but you need a disruption to push that go to get that wagon rolling, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the left is kind of kicking and screaming, and basically they're in a panic. They're literally kicking and screaming. I mean, they're trying to do any kind of disruption, everything from blocking ICE from deporting people and things. Congress people are coming in, and um, it's all theater though, and anybody who watches it closely sees that it's theater, and that and then the people on the right are all like, well, we should throw the book at them. I hope they spend years in jail. It's not going to happen. These are leaders. They're not going to spend years in jail. Their careers aren't even going to suffer. In fact, they're doing this
Yeah,
because to make noise moves you up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I mean, so people are saying right now, why is ICE wearing masks and all this kind of stuff? I remember the FBI wearing masks the whole time under Biden.
Hmm.
The FBI would
Yeah.
be out in the streets rounding people up in masks.
Yeah. And I
Face.
mean, nowadays you have facial recognition software. You don't want your face out there everywhere if I mean, I don't know how spies do it these days, because you get recognized once, I guess you have to have plastic surgery or something to change your look, or, you know.
Or they have these, well, they have realistic looking masks now too. The hell they sell them on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cost
It's
a couple
crazy.
grand. I think the most expensive ones I saw were like 15 grand, but
Mm,
they're paper thin and they like stick to your face and they move with your face and your eyes and lips and everything. It's crazy, man. Like
yeah.
crazy.
Might want to get one of those for Halloween of a leader and just show up at somebody's party.
Bush is here. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. No,
Crazy.
so there was this Hollywood mask maker who went and started working for the CIA, and she did this big interview about how they make masks for these guys, and that they actually use masks that
Yeah.
they can
There was a
go in.
lot of rumors that Biden had a bunch of doubles, which all leaders do. But they had pictures where he was much taller than he actually is. And then his ears were in a different place, which I know that he's had plastic surgery and he also has had other surgeries from his brain aneurysms from years before he was even in office. So that kind of stuff makes you wonder,
We can't prove it, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, everything that seems, if the truth is too unbelievable, it's usually true.
yeah.
That's my experience. If something is so outlandish and so unbelievable, it's usually true. I mean, I've heard things from people in places where I had no business being, uh, that I can never repeat because it's just so outlandish but I know it's true because of who said it, that I can never repeat because it'd be like, there's no way that I could ever say this in a way that anyone wouldn't think that I'm a complete nutcase.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's like I'm feeling sort of vulnerable right now because I think I might have done a little bit too much here, a little bit, let a little bit much out of the bag here. I don't know, but what I've done and stuff, but maybe it's my time
Yeah, yeah.
to do
Well,
it because
I appreciate it. Uh, Maybe that's a good time for us to wrap up. I do appreciate everything, and I hope you come back. And where can folks find you on the internet or anywhere else?
well, on Instagram it's Steven Eugene Kuhn. That's easy, Steven Eugene Kuhn with an Eugene. And then on X, my old account got nixed, it got hacked or whatever. So I have an account. It's Coon Steven 90717. So that's where I am now, to be seen. But
Perfect.
and TikTok Stephen Eugene Kuhn. If you Google my name, Stephen Eugene Kuhn, you'll find me somewhere.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all our listeners. And until next time.